You showed me how to dare to love. So tell me what you're thinking of.
All right. We should be live. Hi everybody, let me know if you hear me, if you can see me properly. And also, today is the first time I use some background music, so let me know if the music is too high or too low or too distracting. Just let me know and we will adjust it as it comes. All right, so thanks everyone for being here tonight. And first of all, I want to apologize because some of you may know that this stream was supposed to happen last week. I normally stream on the first Tuesday of the month, but I had some technical issues with my camera. For some reason, it didn't display anything anymore, so I couldn't really go live. So apologies for that. Hopefully today everything will be all right. Let me know also if you are here because you've received the newsletter. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go to CoderDave.io. You have the newsletter box and you get the notification for every time I go live, so you will not miss any live stream and other content. We have monthly newsletters. We have I plan to send out some newsletter about some promotion that some of our partners will put on just for the channel subscribers and the newsletter subscribers. So go ahead and go to coderdave.io/newsletter and subscribe. It's totally free. Last but not least, before we start, I don't know if you've seen on either Twitter or on the YouTube page, or I've also posted in the channel. I'm gonna start a series in which I will basically review your own CI/CD workflows, whether it's GitHub Actions or pipelines. So if you are interested in that, if you want to have your workflow reviewed by me in either a video or perhaps a live stream, you can go and you can find the link in the video description, in this description. It's a GitHub repo. You can submit an issue with all the information about your CI/CD workflow and so on and so forth. And after some triage, I will see and I will pick some of those CI/CD entries and do a review video on those. So we do have quite a few people already. We have Shyam from India. And by the way, sorry if I don't pronounce your name correctly. I'm terrible with names and with pronunciation. We have Armateluna from Chile. Wow. We have Abu also from Arbin from India, and he said he had the notification, so glad it works. There has been a problem the other week with the newsletter that some people didn't receive, and some people did receive the newsletter even though it was not supposed to be sent out because the live stream was canceled. So apologies for that, but good to know that you have now the notifications and the newsletter. All right, so let's start today. Keep letting me know where you're watching from if you join. And so let's start with the reason why I wanted to make this live stream. So as you probably know, and let me switch to my screen, GitHub Actions has introduced the environments and the approvals a while back, right? So now we have in public repos, for example, we go to environments. We can go to environments. We have the different environments, and in each environment, we can specify up to 5 users or groups that are the reviewers for that environment. And what that means is that whenever you are trying to deploy to that specific environment, the reviewers will have to review, as the name says, the deployment, and will grant basically approval for that specific deployment. Now, this works very well. It's what a lot of people have asked for. There is a problem. This feature is only available on public repos, or if you want to have it on private repos, it's available only in the GitHub Enterprise Cloud. So if you have an organization that is not on Enterprise Cloud, or if you have like the Teams plan and so on and so forth, you will not see this. And in fact, you see this is a private repo, right? And this is the repo I'm gonna use for these live stream. And if we go to settings, we do not have the environment section over here. So we cannot use the environments for having approvals for our deployments. So what I'm gonna try and do today is give you a way to still have some sort of approvals that of course will not be the same exact thing because as we've just seen, it's not available. But I wanna give you a way to achieve some approvals using another way in private repos. This repo that you see here, these deployment approvals, is currently private because I wanted to showcase how this works. But as soon as I finish this live stream, and so also if you're watching this after the fact, recorded, this repo will be made public, so you will be able to access all the YAML and all the things we're gonna write in tonight for me or today for you. And also you can find a link of this in the description under the resources. Right, so let's start with this. As always, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I may not be able to see all the questions straight away, So if you want to have my attention, just mention my name at CoderDave, or even better, if you want to use the super chats, that will pop up for me and I can see it immediately. All right, so what do we have here? Apart from the license and the README, I do have this markdown file, and we will talk about that in a second. And I do have here build and deploy. The deploy, it's currently empty. As you can see, we will gonna fill it in a moment. The build right now, and let me edit this, we will start with this, is just a normal build. It's actually doing nothing, it's simulating a build. You can see that I've just, creating basically a file. And then I'm publishing that file as an artifact. This is the, this will be a normal build. Whenever you do a build on your GitHub Actions, what you would do is, going through all the steps of testing and building and so on and so forth. And in the end, you will want to publish an artifact to have basically the result of the build available for the next steps. Now, in this scenario, normally what we would do, we would have probably another job here for the deployment using the environments. But what I want to do now, since we do not have environments, is using something called IssueOps. And what that means is that we are going to use some GitHub issues as a mean for having those approvals. And it sounds easy. You will see that there's a bunch of things that we will need to consider if you want to make this process, error-proof and as more complete as possible. And I'm gonna walk you through all of those things that we need to consider. And also, I'm gonna do this all in this repo. But stay with me, because later I'm gonna explain you why probably you don't want to have everything of this in a single repo. You may want to have those different things and different issues and things we will see in maybe a different repo. I'm gonna go and talk about that later when we have something in place already, but let's start with this action. So when we have the approval, what we wanna do, right? After the build, we wanna approve the deployment to the next environment. In this case will be a development environment, right? So using the IssueOps, as I mentioned before, means that we rely on issues to do some intermediate work, right? What I'm gonna do is searching for an action which allows me to create an issue. There are a bunch of those. The ones I normally use is the actions that have the most stars because it means that it's a good action. And of course, as you probably know, whenever you click on an action, you know that you can go to the full marketplace listing, and that can also take you to the GitHub page in which the code for the issue is stored. All right, so with that said, we have this create an issue action from, I forgot the name of the creator, from Jason Etko. So let's take these. We probably don't need all of those. Well, let's copy and then we can clean it out later. So let's put it out here. Let's link this a little bit better. Let's get rid of these. So basically, this action allows you to create an issue based on a template. We do have a question from Arvin. We say, will you save this video? Yes, of course. This video now, it's obviously a live video, but as soon as it's finished, it will be posted as a recorded live streaming. So you can always go back to this video and see anything you want to rewatch, if you want to rewatch a section. And as I mentioned before, this repo is currently private, but you will be able, I will switch it to public when I finish today, so you will be able to go and see all the code later on. All right, so we have this create an issue, and as I was saying, it basically relies on a template, a markdown template. You know that you can have issue templates in GitHub. So what I'm gonna do is basically removing all of those because I don't need them, all I need to specify here is the file name of my issue template, which for me, it's this one. Is the one we've seen before. It's in the code and it's called deployment approval markdown. So obviously, if this was a real CI, we would have a CI trigger. And in this case, I only have the trigger for manual kickoff the build to make it easier. And this is regardless. Whenever you create an issue, whenever you create a GitHub Action workflow, I always recommend you to have the workflow dispatch trigger, because it's much easier to debug or to kick it off when you're just developing it, and then you put the normal triggers or the proper triggers you would want to have. All right, so let's keep this like this for a second, and let me open another tab here with this template. Again, if you're not familiar with that, whenever you create an issue in GitHub, you can specify a template. Normally, it's called issue_template, and that will be picked up automatically by GitHub. In this case, I decided to give it another name not to interfere with the normal issue creation. And if I open this, you can see that there are a few things here. So this is the issue template format. You can give it a title, you can give it a label. In my case, I decided to label it deployment requested, and this will be important in a second. So remember that we have this label. You can give it whatever label you want, of course. And I want the issue to have the title like deployment approval required for the name of the environment. As you can see, we can specify this notation that you may be familiar with in GitHub Actions. And this will basically evaluate the environment variables normally in action workflows, but in this case, the action will evaluate this in the template. So we will be able to pass variables basically to the issue creation through that GitHub Actions. So I want to have the environment. So I want to see these issues saying deployment approval required for dev, for prod, for QA, and so on and so forth. I want to give more information. For example, I want to know who initiated that deployment. So I'm going to use this other variable. This is not an environment variable, it's a context variable. So those are variables that are passed by default to the action. There's an event basically of creation of this issue. And you can use the payload and the sender and login. So basically, if I'm going to run this action or to create this issue, this will be deployment approval requested from my user, which is Newton. And then in my case, what I want to do is if a user comment on this issue saying approved, for example, I want the deployment to take place. Now, there are many other ways that you can achieve that. I've seen people doing it like if you close the issue, then get the deployment going. If you add a label, for example, to the issue, with a specific label, then the deployment is approved. There are multiple ways, and I will explain in a second how we can differentiate on those. In my case, I wanted to make it simple, so I wanted just to say, okay, if a user comment approved to the issue, then make it deploy. And then I have probably the most important part, which is this part over here. This will be more clear later, because this is related on how we will consume this data. But think about what you're doing. You're basically splitting the build and the deploy. So you need basically a way to pass some metadata between the two workflows to be able to complete the job. And in my case, I want to pass those things. I want to pass the run number and the environment. As I mentioned before, the environment, we use it also here, but I leave it like this for a second. This will be much clearer when we go through the next section, which is the deployment part, right? So the important thing I want to point out here is that I need now to pass these variables to this file, to this issue when the issue is created. Now, how I do it here? Well, the way to do this here is to use the environment section of this action. So one thing I need to pass for sure is the GitHub token. This is used by this action to be able to create the issue in my repo. And then I have the environment variables that I've used in my template. Remember, I have the environment and I have the run number. And again, I'll explain in a second why I'm using those variables. Just bear with me for a second on this. So we said that we want to deploy to the next environment, and the next environment in this case will be the dev environment. So let's just put here the dev. And then I want the run number, and the run number I can consume it from a variable that is in the context of the GitHub action. So it's github.runNumber. There's a difference between run number and run ID. You can use either ones. I prefer run number because it's easier to understand and to consume. Basically, run number is a progressive number that is assigned to a specific GitHub action workflow. For example, this is the CI GitHub action workflow. So the first time I execute this will be run number 1, the next one will be run number 2, and so on and so forth. And if I have another workflow, let's call it the deploy, for example, that we will see in a second. Again, the first time I'll execute that will be 1. So I'll have CI1, deploy 1, CI2, deploy 2, and so on and so forth. While if I use run ID, it will be like a long number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or something like that. And it's more difficult to relate that to a specific workflow. In general, here, I want to have something to be able to refer back to a specific run of a workflow. And that's basically it. So I have my template, I have my issue creation, and so on and so forth. So let me commit these. Let me go to the actions. Oh, and by the way, you can see that I don't have any open issue right now. I go to action, I have my CI, ignore this for a second, and let me run this. What we expect is that this should run with no issues. We'll do the build, or pretend to do the build, and create the issue. Let me check the chat. Hey, hi Mickey, I didn't see you there. He's asking if we can access the GitHub context. Yes, it's not the GitHub context, is the context of the event of issue creation. So it's not the whole GitHub dot, but it's the payload for the event of the issue creation. And he's also saying that, yeah, we've seen people doing like / approved, can be many things. The concept here is having whatever works best for you. And as I mentioned before, it could be any command, it can be different ways closing the issue. You would want to do something that is not accidentally done. So just, you don't want to use like OK, because if you use OK, maybe someone type OK in the issue and then accidentally you deploy. So you need to have some security and governance over those things, I guess. But yeah, a lot of people use /, for example, or // and so on and so forth. All right, the action workflow is completed. So if I go to issues now, yeah, I have my issue created. And you can see that I have my environment that is being populated. I have my username here, and I have the metadata, if you will, the payload for my own event. Now that we have that, it starts the interesting part. It's how to consume this to make it deploy. So let's go back to the code. By the way, there's any question on this part? I think it's been pretty straightforward. Of course, again, I didn't explain why I need those variables, but this will become clear in a second. Right. Let me edit my deploy action. Of course, as you can see now, it's completely empty. So the first thing I want to do is trigger this. And in my case, as I mentioned before, I want to start the deploy when the user comment on that specific issue with the word approved. So what I need to use is the issue comment type of trigger, but not any issue comment, because there are different types of this event. So I just want to use the created event, because I want only to trigger this whenever a user types the approved keyword. And then I need to do a few other things, including checking that only the comment approved triggers this, because if I just leave the trigger like this will be triggered for any single comment, but I want only the approved one. So let's create a job. I'll call it parse, and will be clear in a second why I call it parse. And to be able to discriminate only on the comments I want, which is the approved one, I need to use a conditional. So I'm gonna say, and the conditionals work like this. I'm gonna say, let me copy this because I will never remember it. I will say something like this. So if the event that or the event payload contains comment and the comment is approved, then run this job. Otherwise, the issue will still, the action workflow will still be triggered, but if any other comment is found, it'll basically do nothing. We'll just evaluate this and exit because it's not the comment I want. Also, and this is something that is not very clear, but this one, even though the trigger is issue comment, this can be triggered also for pull requests. The issue comment event is also created whenever a comment is done on a pull request. So we want to make sure that this doesn't happen for a pull request, but happens only for an issue. So I'm gonna use again another part of this GitHub event. And basically I'm gonna say that if this GitHub event is a pull request, then I don't want to execute this. So this will be my whole condition. I don't want this to be executed for a pull request, and I want this to be executed only if the comment is literally just approved. Nothing else. This is what I want to have. Of course, GitHub is not happy because I don't have the runs on, which is mandatory, and I'm gonna execute these on Linux. And then we can have our steps. Now, why I call this parse? I call this job parse because I want to consume. Let me go back here, for example. I want to consume the data I have in my issue. I need to know where I have to deploy, and I need to know what I have to deploy, right? So to do so, I can use another action. I need to remember how it's called. I think is issue body parser. This one by Peter Murray. So I'm gonna copy this, and what this action does is basically reading the whole issue and going to consume this part, which is JSON. The issue can work with, the action can work with both JSON or YAML. I decided here to use JSON because it's easier. I don't know. I just decided to use JSON, but if you want to use YAML, you can use YAML. I think the default is JSON. And if you see here, this is not just JSON, but I basically tagged this section because you can have even multiple sections. This is something I don't have here, but if you want to have multiple values or multiple sections of metadata in your issue, you can tag them and consume only the one you actually need in that specific moment. So what I'm gonna do is, let me clean a little bit of these things. I still need to indent this. I'm calling these get issue data, for example. I do need to give the GitHub token because otherwise it doesn't have access to the issues part, and I need to identify the issue that contains the metadata. This is this issues ID. And again, we can rely on something that GitHub provides for us, which is this GitHub event issue number. Because we are triggering this by an issue comment, so we have a payload for this event, for this trigger, which is the issue itself. And in the issue object, we do have the number of the issue. So this will allow these action to identify the issue that we need to consume. Again, we can specify the type of payload, which is YAML or JSON. In my case, is JSON, so it's the default as I mentioned before. And I can specify a payload marker that, again, as I mentioned before, to identify only the section I want, which in my case is this target payload. This is not a keyword. This is just whatever you want to call it. If you want to call it as as long as you have the same value here, this works. So let me copy this again. Right. So this action will actually read this section and basically consume the JSON and in it. Why I need this? Because of course, as I mentioned, I need those data. To consume those data in other jobs or steps, I'm gonna give this step an ID, and let's call it issue body parser. If you're not familiar with IDs, they are just unique names that you can specify and you can assign to a specific action to be able to reference the, for example, output values of that action in other steps or job. There's one more thing I want to do because I want to make it a little bit prettier. I want this action, whenever it starts, notify the user in the issue that we're doing something, right? That the deployment has started. So I'm gonna add here. I'm gonna add here another action, which is comment on issue, which is the Peter Evans, if I can find it. It's not necessarily easy because I want to have a specific one that is the one I've seen with most stars. Now I can't obviously find it. Let's try comment issue. There should be there. No, this is the find comment. I wonder if I can find it the other way around. Never mind. I do have it here. Just let me copy from my notes. This is something I don't necessarily like from the marketplace. If you don't specify exactly the exact name, it's very hard to find a specific issue or a specific action that you want to use. This is something I wish we could do better, but anyway. So this is the Peter Evans create because it's create or update comment. So Again, I'm gonna just pass the issue number, and I'm gonna specify the comment body I want. Basically, this is just a way to notify the users that something is going on. So whenever this will run, I expect to have this deployment initiated message as a comment in my issue, so I know that something is going on. Now that I have the data, I want to actually deploy, right? So let's say I want to have here another job, and I'm gonna call it deploy dev, for example, and in which I will do the actual deployment. Now, first thing I want to specify here is that this needs to run only after the parse job got the metadata, right? So I'm gonna tell this job that it needs the parse job. So this means that this can run only after the parse has completed, and will run only if the parse succeeded. And I need to obviously add the runs. And since I'm gonna have other deployment probably in the same issue, like for example deploy to production, deploy to QA, and so on and so forth, I need a way to identify when I need to run these. And I do have, if you remember in my issue, I do have the environment. So, and the environment is being read by this get issue data. So I need a way to pass those data from this step, which is in another job, to this job. Because in here I'll have this conditional, like we've seen before, and I will say execute this only if whatever, which is the environment, it's, for example, dev. This is obviously wrong. Something like that. Now, this whatever needs to be the environment that comes from here. So how can I consume the environment or the value of the variable that I read in here in the other job? Well, I need to specify some output parameters or output data out of this job. So this is something that has been introduced a while back, and we now have this outputs section in the job definition, basically. So what I need is, let's call it deploy environment. Now, this is something that will be consumed here as an output parameter of this job. And we'll see in a second how to consume it. But now, first thing, I need to get the environment data out of this issue body parser. The way to do this, and let me copy this, if not I will make 300 typos, is this. So this get issue data basically returns as an output parameter of type JSON. This doesn't matter if you use JSON or if you use YAML in your data, as I mentioned before. In either cases, this will produce some some JSON output. So I need to convert it from JSON, and I'm gonna use this syntax, which is getting from the step called issue body parser, which is this step over here, outputs, and then payload. This is the name basically of the variable that the step has as output parameter. And in here, after using the from JSON, I will be able to access this as an object, and so I can consume the environment parameter, which again, if we go back here, is exactly the name we have here. So this is why I have that environment parameter, because that action was reading this, converted to an object with the from JSON, and so I can access it here. I'm gonna add also the other parameter that we have. I'm gonna call it CI run number, and the syntax is exactly the same. I have the from JSON, the name of the output parameter, and run number, which once again is the same parameter we have over here. Now, with this syntax, those two variables, basically those two parameters, will be made available to other jobs. And in this case, the way that is made available is through the needs, because the only thing that basically put in connection this deploy dev job with this parse job is the need clause. Let me go a little bit down there. Here. All right. So we have this needs clause. So how can I access these parameters? Well, once again, we need to use some syntax out of GitHub. And I just noticed that I only had one equal. And it's like this, is needs, it comes from here. The name of the job that is under needs, so parse. And again, outputs and the name of the variable or the output parameter. So I have this deploy-environment, which is the same I have here. In this way, I can evaluate and run this job only if the environment specified in the issue that is being used as a trigger for this is dev. And in here, then I can, do my usual stuff that I would do for deployments, right? So I can have the steps. Maybe, I don't know, I need some other stuff. And remember that we have the build done in the other GitHub Actions workflow, right? So, and in there we do publish an artifact. So we need a way to basically download the build artifact that we have created in the build section. To do so, we do use another action, and we call download artifact. But we have a problem. If we use the download a build artifact action that is official action from GitHub, this can be used only to download an artifact from the same workflow. So if I have like build and deploy in the same workflow, that download artifact is able to download that artifact, but is not able, as we have to do here, to download an artifact from a separate workflow. To do so, we need to use a third-party one. And again, my criteria here is to go and use the one with the most stars, which is this one from Dawit D6. It has a bunch of parameters that you can specify. So I do have already a version here that I customized for this specific scenario. And you see it's the same one, it's Dawit D6. And in here, I only need these few parameters. This is why I don't want to go through all of those right now. It's all thing that gives you more control over the action. But what I basically need here is to specify first the repo where I want to download the artifact from. So in my case, is the same repo, but I could also specify another repo. And this is very, very important. And this is something I mentioned before. You probably don't want to execute all of these in the same repo, because you want to have a way to control who can approve and who cannot approve your deployment. So one thing that I've seen done, for example, is creating this issue in a separate repo where only the people that have access or that have the privilege to approve those deployments can actually access. So you can be sure that only the authorized reviewers and approvers can actually do. So if we go back to our workflow here, again, this in my case is the same repo, but can be a different repo. I need to specify the workflow I want to consume my artifact from, and I can use, like in this case, the name of the file, so build.yaml, or you can use the ID of that workflow that in my case was CI. And here we know now why I need the run number. I need a way to identify the specific action or the specific workflow that generated that artifact that I'm going to download. Otherwise, this action, if you don't specify the run number, will give you the most updated artifact or the latest artifact that it finds for that specific workflow. And it's not what we want, because we want to deploy the specific version of that artifact that that issue we commented on refers to. This is why in the issue we have, if we go back, we have this run number, which in this case is 9. And in fact, if I go to my actions, you can see that the CI is small here, but is the CI number 9, right? And we need to refer to that. And so this is why we pass this parameter all through the chain from the get issue data to the output parameters. And now we can finally use it here in this action. We need to specify, it's not that we need, but we better specify the name of the artifact we want to download, because if you don't specify the name of the artifact, this action will actually download all the artifacts that you can find in a specific workflow. In my case, in this example, I only have one, so that wouldn't matter. But if you have a build or a CI workflow that produce more artifacts, you probably want to specify the name over here. And then you can specify the path where you want this artifact to be downloaded. When you have that, then of course you can proceed with your deployment. In this case, of course, I'm just going to simulate the deployment. I don't have anything to deploy. And this is basically it. Now, it's not it in the sense that I have quite a few other things that I want to show you, but let's see if the whole process we have so far works. So if we have to recap what we've done, we have seen that we triggered this by commenting on the issue. The comment must be from an issue, not from a pull request, and it must be equal to approved. And when we do that, we will have a comment added to the issue by GitHub directly that notifies the users that we are actually doing something with that issue. We will parse the issue data, and if the issue data contains dev, we will consume the artifact from the build that generated that issue, and we deploy. Now, let's try this out. We have this issue. Let's comment approve, and let's see what happens. In just a few seconds, we should see here the message from the GitHub Actions appearing. It should be any second now. There we go. We have this GitHub Actions bot that commented deployment initiated. So this part works. Let's go see how everything is going. So the parse, of course, is completed. We have the comment. We got the issue data. I'm not sure if we can see the data over here. No, but we do have the issue ID and everything. So the deployment is actually being successful. We can see that we were able to get the run number 9, that is the one we specify in the issue. We downloaded the artifact, and we pretended to deploy. So this, it's already, it's been successful, of course, but there are a few things that I want to do. First of all, as you've seen here, the issue is still here. So first thing we want to do is probably closing this issue, right? So this is one thing. Another thing, we want to probably chain multiple deployments, like we would do in a scenario when we use the environments. We would have deployment to dev, and then we approve and we deploy to QA, and when we approve and we deploy to production, and so on and so forth. So let's see how we can do this. But basically, with everything we've seen, we should be able to do again this specific workflow. So let me go ahead and close this issue manually, and let's go back to my deployment workflow, and let's see what we can do here. So first of all, let me try and explain why or how we can proceed, because of course there are again multiple ways to achieve that. But as I mentioned before, I want to make sure that after deploying to environment A, I go to environment B, and then I go to environment C, and so on and so forth. So using the same IssueOps kind of workflow, what I could do is, for example, when I finish deploying in dev and I know everything is successful, I should create another issue for the next environment, right? So to do so, I can use the exact same approach I had in the previous one when I created the first issue for the dev environment. So I use exactly the same action. I'm gonna use exactly the same thing. So environment run number. Of course, the environment in this case I'm gonna change, and let's say I want to, after dev, I want to deploy to production. So I'm gonna specify the environment production. Oh, sorry, I just noticed that the screen was not showing. So now the screen, you should be able to see the action. As I was saying before, I'm gonna use the exact same action, the JSON Atco one, and I'm gonna just change the environment to production. And of course, I need to have the run number. The run number in the one we've seen before, it was easier to get because it came from the build, right? So we had it in the context. In here, we can use, again, the CI run number variable that we have. And this is something that is very important and I want to stress on. And this is usually the case whenever you do CI/CD. You want to build once and then deploy multiple times the same exact artifact. Maybe you can change the configuration, because maybe when you deploy to dev, you have a DB connection, that is one thing. When you deploy to another environment, the DB credentials or connection are different. But the artifact you want to deploy is exactly the same. And this is why I'm gonna use the same run number that I had before when I deployed in dev, for example, also for deploying to production. And this is why I'm consuming it from the needs variable, because it's the one that it's parsed from the issue. And I'm gonna use the exact same template for doing so. Now, when I have that, I can proceed and basically duplicate these to deploy in production, right? So I'm gonna have my deploy prod, for example, typos, that once again needs the parse job to execute because it needs to consume the data from it. And of course, in this case, I need to have it as prod, not as dev, right? I think the indentation here is wrong. There we go. I find YAML pretty picky. Once again, we have our steps, and we can do exactly the same thing. We can download our artifact from from the build we had before, and we can simulate the deployment, this time of course deploying to production. Right, so basically we have the exact same thing. So in this case we deploy to dev if we are coming from dev, in the issue. In this case we deploy to production if we're coming to production. The last thing we need to do is, whenever we finish with the deployment, and of course, sorry, in this case, since production is ideally my last environment, I'm not gonna create another issue like I do in development, because there's nothing to deploy after production, right? In theory. So I'm not gonna do that. Last thing we have to do, and we have to add here, is, as I mentioned before, closing the issue. If you remember, I had to close the issue manually, because after deployment nothing was happening. So what I want to do is closing the issue automatically. And again, this is a personal preference. You may want to have, for example, another comment like this one saying deployment completed. And in fact, let's just add this. Let's add here another one that says deployment completed, with perhaps star. There we go. And same we could do in production. But then if we start, we take these, we put it in production, we have duplication of code, and then we should have another task over here, as I mentioned before, to close the issue. And again, we should do it here, and we should do it in production. And this will be duplicated for each and every environment we want to deploy. So I wanna make it a little bit more elegant. So this duplicated code for commenting on an issue or closing the issue, I want to move it to another job. I'm gonna create a job that I'm close issue. Again, it runs. Let me copy this. Runs on whatever. And now we want to execute this and follow my reasoning. This needs to be executed at the end of every execution, right? If it's successful. So whether we are deploying to dev, to test, QA, or production, we want the issue to that specific environment to be closed if everything is successful. But we can't execute this step instead if for any reason the deployment fails. Now I don't have any rollback implemented here or anything like that. That's something that probably you want to have, or at least a message saying deployment failed or anything like that. But the main point here is that I want to close the issue only for that specific environment, and I want to execute these whenever something finishes successfully. So let's go back to here. And the way to do this is, first of all, with a conditional here. And, or let's start with something else. Let's start with the needs. We need to execute this step after deploy dev and deploy prod are executed. So we do this, deploy dev, deploy prod. And here we go. However, in each specific run, only one of the two jobs will run. One will finish successfully and one will be skipped. Because of the skipping part, this job will never execute, but we need it to execute. So what we have to do is using this always. Always means that this job will be executed no matter what. So even if everything fails, this will be executed. This is the only way, unfortunately, we have to specify that as long as one of those two are executed, or one of the many, you need to run. We don't have either or. So the needs clause you see here is basically end. So there's no way to specify either or, so we have to have this always over here. But this adds a problem, because as I said before, we want to be able to close the issue only and only if the deployment is being successful. So what I have to do is move that control not on the job level, but on the step level. So I'll have this step that I may want to, close issue, right? And in here, I have to add the conditional, again, like usual. And I need to be a little bit hacky here. I need to be a little bit of workaround. And let me copy this and I'll explain why. I need to do this for every single environment. So as I mentioned before, I need to execute this only if either of those, deployed to prod or deployed to dev, are successful, And so I need to specify something like this. So for each of those environments, if the result, which again is part of the context or the payload that is passed to this job, if the result of that job is successful, or the result of the other job is successful, then continue and execute this step. Now, this is not, I realize that it's not the best thing, because if you have 10 different jobs for 10 different environments, you would have to add here 10 different conditionals. But unfortunately, as to my knowledge, this is the only way you can achieve this, because again, we need to execute this with the always, otherwise this will not be executed because the different jobs will be skipped, but we need to be successful. So this is the only one I can think of. If you have any other suggestion on how we can achieve the same thing, please feel free to contact to put it in the chat, or if you're watching this afterwards, in the comments. And again, we can search for close issues. And this one by Peter Evans is the one with the most comments, so I'm gonna use it. Not comments, I mean stars. Let me delete these comments. Once again, we need to specify the token. In my case, I'm not gonna use the repository because it's in the same repository, but as I mentioned before, if you use this in a different repository, then it's good to specify here the repository. And we do need to have the issue number. And in my case, this is, well, actually we don't need to specify because the default is already the one we would use. As we've mentioned before, this is triggered by an issue comment, and we do have the GitHub event issue number in it, so we don't actually need to specify the issue number. And I want to have a comment. So as I mentioned before, I was going to create a new comment in the issue using the same, task or action we used before. But this action does actually allow us to have a comment directly with this one, so we don't need to use another one, and we can use this deployment completed. Now, with this, we should have everything. Let me commit this to save the changes. What happened? I thought I committed it. Okay. So now we have multiple jobs. We parse the issue, we get the data, we save, we deploy to the specific environment. Let's say dev. We download the artifact to deploy that we find in the build that we've done before. We deploy and we create an issue for production. And instead, if we come from production, again, we download the artifact, so we deploy exactly the same thing. We have that kind of assurance there. And if everything is okay, we close the issue with the comment deployment complete. So we don't have issues here. Let's go to actions and let's start the full process. This is the CI, so let's run this. All right, this is running. Let me know, of course, if you have any question. Let me know in the chat. Okay, this is completed, and in fact we do have our issue for dev as we've done before. As you can see, if I comment with anything else, like this is a comment, nothing will happen, or better, the workflow will be triggered, but everything will be skipped because this comes from a different comment. So if you go here, you see that this has been skipped, this has been skipped, this has been skipped, and this is actually executed because we have the always, but the close issue step is actually being skipped. So our issue is still here and nothing has happened. But if I go with approved and I comment this, once again, in a second, we should see the comment from the GitHub Actions bot popping up. And there we go. We have this deployment initiated. And in fact, we can go in the action run, and we see that we are deploying, right? We are downloading the artifact from the issue, and then we will proceed with the deployment. And of course, this failed. Could not be found in your project workspace. Of course, that's my fault. It's my fault because I miss a step. As you can see, let me go back to the error. It says that it cannot find the template. And the reason for this is because I didn't add the checkout step, the checkout action. This also is good that we failed, not because we failed, but because it gives me a possibility to show you that even though we have the always, because that is failed, we haven't executed the close issue task. So let me go back to my action here, to my workflow. So what is he saying is that when we are going to create this other issue, it cannot access this file because we didn't do the checkout. So I should have it over here. Yeah. The action itself, the workflow itself, cannot access the files in your Git repo unless you check it out or unless you use some APIs, and that must be specified. So in this case, I just check out, so I'll be able to use that file, and I'll add it there. And I don't need it on the other step because I'm not going to use any file from the repo. So once again, this is obviously not something that should happen because in fact we did deploy, right? But the issue creation was not successful. So this is something that of course you should implement with a better error control, if you will. But for this demo, I think it's important to go through to the whole process. So let me type approved again. Again, as I said before, I will make this repo public. So if you want to access those files and see, and copy the code or perhaps make it better, feel free to do so. Those are of course basic scenarios. And as I mentioned, there should be more, a better error control, error management, and so on and so forth. Remember that this is the issue 13, the one we were working on, right? Is the issue 13 for dev. Now, the deployment has been successful. So we see that we do have now the issue for production, which is the issue number 14. And if everything works correctly, there we go. The issue for dev deployment is also being closed. And in fact, it was the issue number 13. And you can see that it's being closed by the GitHub Action bot, and we do have the deployment completed message. Same thing will happen with the production. So once again, let me comment with approved. The run number is exactly the same. This is the build run number, right? The build number 10, which produced the artifact that we want to deploy, but the environment is the production environment, is not anymore the dev environment. Once again, we should have here, there we go, the deployment initiated message. And we do have, thank you very much for the super chat, Italian fan art. Thank you for your wonderful job. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah, it took me a while to put this together, but it's good to see, some recognition, I think. All right, so let me go back to the run. This is running for the production, and it's actually completed. You see, we skipped the development. Job. We instead executed the production job, and we executed the close issue, which of course has completed everything. And in fact, no more issues here. And we do have again the deployment completed message or comment, and closed by the GitHub Actions boat. Whew. All right. So this is what I had. This is using IssueOps as a way to have approvals and basically anything else that you can think of. This is, IssueOps is a concept that allow you basically to use the issues together with GitHub Actions and the triggers that GitHub Actions provide you to be able to accomplish those kind of things. In this case, approvals, because as we said in the beginning, there's no approval for private repo that are not in GitHub Enterprise Cloud. And so this is one of the way you can achieve a very similar flow, if you will, with just some workaround. Again, as I mentioned before, I've done this in the same repo, so I have build, issues, and deployment in the same repo. This is not ideal because, of course, if anyone can comment the issue, we'll be able to deploy even maybe in different environments. You probably don't want to be able to do that. So, as I mentioned before, one of the possibility here is having these, the issue, for example, created in a different repo. Maybe the deployment flow in a different repo. That depends on you. But with the actions I've used and you've seen on screen, and you will see if you check the files, you're able now to do that, to use different repos for different things. I think this is what I have. I don't know if anyone has any question. Feel free to drop the questions in the chat, and of course, if you're watching this recorded later, if you have any question, put it in the comments. There are no other things I have for you today or tonight. In my case, it's almost 11 p.m. here where I am, so sorry my voice is a little bit low. I had a very long day. Hope you guys appreciated the what we've been through. And yeah, once again, if you're not part of the newsletter and you want to know whenever I go live, go to coderdave.io/newsletter, and you just subscribe for free to the newsletter, so you'll have a notification 30 minutes before I go live, and together with monthly newsletters and other stuff. And yeah, last thing I mentioned before when in the opening, if you were not here, I'm going to have a new series in which I'm gonna go and review your own CI/CD workflows, whether they are from GitHub Actions or Azure Pipelines. If you want to have your CI/CD workflow reviewed, go to the link you see in the video description. Under resources, there's a GitHub link, and you open an issue. You basically submit your workflow for review, and if it's selected, I will either make a video about it, or even we maybe go live with the creator of that workflow and comment it together and try to review it and see what can be done better, or if it's a very good one, we can talk about it and see and take inspiration for other workflows. All right, with that, I think I am done. I don't see any question in the chat, so I think I'm gonna conclude this live stream here. Thank you very much for joining me today or tonight. I really appreciate it. And again, I hope you found this valuable, and I'll see you next time in the next video. Bye.